I'm Margaret Floyd Barry, Master Restorative Wellness Practitioner, author, speaker, and Executive Director of Restorative Wellness Solutions. Each week, I interview the world's leading experts in functional health and nutrition to uncover the latest research findings, case studies, and evidence-based clinical applications for reversing chronic disease, including actionable insights and strategies you can implement immediately to elevate your practice, increase your impact, and change the way health is delivered. On today's episode of the Clinicians Corner, I sat down with Debra Atkinson, hormone-balancing fitness expert, creator of the first and only hormone-balancing fitness program exclusively for women in menopause, and best-selling author of You Still Got It, Girl, the After 50 Fitness Formula for Women. This was an incredible interview, and I will tell you right up front, we had a large, engaged live audience who stayed with us right up to the very end, which is not always the case. What I love about Debra is how she understands nuance. We see a lot of fitness experts and influencers who have a method, they generally apply to their entire audience. And Debra understands just how bio-individual a fitness program needs to be in order to be effective. This is not at all a one-size-fits-all approach, and she gives us really practical considerations for how to customize an exercise strategy, just like we would the diet or a supplement protocol. The primary focus here is for women as we transition to and through menopause, but really this overall concept and this deeply bio-individual approach applies to everyone, male or female. I'm so excited to have you join me for this one today. I got so much out of this conversation, including, I'll admit, some hard truths I need to face about my own fitness strategy, and I know you will too. Now, let's dive in. So welcome, everybody. It is so great to see you all here. I am super excited for tonight's episode of the RWS Clinicians Corner. Tonight, we get to dive into one of my favorite topics, which is fitness. And we have hormone balancing fitness expert. So this is not your average, I was gonna say not your average Joe, not your average Jane either. Debra is amazing. Debra Atkinson has helped more than 275,000 yes, that's 275,000 women flip their second half with energy and vitality. She's the best-selling author of You Still Got It, Girl, the After 50 Fitness Formula for Women, and Hot Not Bothered. Debra hosts Flipping 50 TV, an internet broadcast, and the Flipping 50 podcast, which is an AARP top podcast for adults 50 plus, with over 3.5 million downloads, as well as She Means Fitness Business, specifically for health and fitness coaches. Her TEDx talk is Everything Women in Menopause Learned About Exercise May Be a Lie. It's a great talk. You should go watch it. She is the creator of the first and only hormone balancing fitness membership exclusively for women in menopause, and the Flipping 50 menopause fitness specialist training for trainers and health coaches. And Debra and I have known each other for what we were talking about this just before we went live here. I think it's about 5, 6, maybe even 7 years now through the Mindshare Mastermind community. And what has always really impressed me about Debra and why I asked her to come speak with us is how she so thoughtfully intersects these different pieces that often get omitted when we're having conversations about fitness. So she's thinking about endocrine health. She's thinking about bone health. She's thinking about nuance. She's thinking about age-specific considerations and recognizing that one size absolutely does not fit all when it comes to fitness. And even when we're just talking male to female, it's not just that clear cut. So, we are always talking about customization. We're talking about, we're not into generic protocols here at RWS at all. And so, Debra, you are a perfect fit. I'm so excited to chat with you. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And yes, 6 or 7 years, amazing. So just to all of you who already know all of this, but in our community where we've met, we have the utmost respect for Margaret. So you are in fantastic hands. We all look to her for her stellar organization, how she's laid things out so very well. So honored to be here.
Oh, thank you. What I would love to do is start a little bit with your story. Like many of us, I know that your story is represented in your work, and you had this moment where you recognize, as a long history as a fitness professional, that maybe what you had been learning and actually teaching wasn't correct. Can you share a little bit about that moment? Because because you're so specific in what you're working with, how did you get there?
Yeah, well, the hard way, like most of us, right? It's just always those hard knocks schools that are the best. And you listen a little bit better when it hurts like that. But honestly, I thought this was going to go great. I was 49. My son went off to school, and he was literally my only. And I thought, he's going to have a life. They frown on parents going to college with their children. So I should probably get one of my own. And was very comfortable doing what I'd done for 30 years in the same community. And I could have stayed there and just been content. But I felt like there was an itch where our fitness industry needed something more. And I wanted to be a little bit more proud of being there. So having taught in the Department of Kinesiology for 15 years, I, saw all these students who were 4.0 students and had a heart, had the knowledge, and they would get frustrated out on their internships and decide they were going to switch. I can't make it. I don't want to market. I don't want to sell. I can't make a living doing this. And we know so much more now. You can make a good living, providing health information in so many ways. But, at that point, and this was 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. And they weren't seeing it out on their internships because they were looking for a safe place to land. I actually left safety and security and quit everything in order to build up marketing and sales that was not sleazy, salesy, and pushy, that everybody could feel good about. And we could keep the good ones, because all consumers need to find the good ones. The good ones need to stay in it and realize I can do this and make a living out of it. And about 5 minutes after I quit everything and said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to build this thing, I realized, number one, it's going to be really a lot harder than I thought, because you don't just go online magically. A little bit easier now in 2024, but in 2013, there weren't as many vehicles as there are now, thanks to the pandemic. And so there was that. But I also realized I'm not relevant if I'm not doing it. If I say, build your business this way, these things work for marketing and for sales, and I was only doing them in the past, that's not going to work. And very quickly I will become irrelevant. Why should I listen to her? So I chose a niche, and I chose the one that for 30 years I'd been working with mostly baby boomer women, and not realizing that's the demographic, or it was a, hierarchical kind of thing where they were actually laying the foundation for some of the rest of us and what we're not willing to tolerate. So what happened is that side of the business took off a lot faster. When you're reaching consumers, that will happen. And, that went along really well for a while. But as I started digging into it and doing this online work, I realized, I'm exercising a whole lot less than I have for the last 30 years. Now, if you are a fitness or a health professional, you know that sometimes we go over and above. The classes I'm teaching, the things that I'm training others to do, that's not my workout. I do this. And, so we do this and then some. And, this was back, I started in the day, we thought teaching 2 to 4 exercise classes a day was a good idea. And, we know this is not, so please don't go out and try that tomorrow. But I was exercising a lot over those 30 years. And suddenly, I was quit my job at 49. My college tuition for my son was going to be due in about 8 months. And I was having a panic moment, like, this has to work. So I wouldn't let myself away from that computer for very long any day. Like, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to figure out how to do this, how to build a course, take the knowledge I've had and apply it online to more people. And about a year later, I start looking and really seeing through a different lens myself on. And what I realized is I looked better. I looked healthier and I was leaner than I had been doing all of that exercise. And I was getting away from that computer 20 to 30 minutes a day. When I had the time, it was high intensity interval training, or it was a quick 30-minute workout. And when you have 30 minutes, you make it count. Every minute counts, right? You don't scroll through your phone. You're not wasting time between. And I started digging into that because it flew against all things I'd learned and I'd been teaching at a university level. And I realized that the amount of research focused on females is skewed by it's a 40-60 ratio. It's about 39% of all sports medicine and exercise research features women. And I started thinking, all right, women go through, and this is on average, if somebody has fertility issues, there's another one, but on average, about 7 hormonal phases in our lives. If we have children, there's prenatal, postnatal, there's perimenopause, postmenopause. That menopause transition, I know it's a day, but it also is a couple years before and a couple after significant things are happening. Adolescence, not wanting to be pregnant, trying to be pregnant. There's so much going on in every one of those phases we go through demands a unique exercise prescription. You don't do with a postmenopausal woman what you do with a 15-year-old who wants to be the star on her volleyball team. And we weren't getting it. We're getting research, maybe full of men and women of all ages, or primarily young athletic males who are 25, and you'll hear me say this many times. If you start following, men at 25 are at the peak of their muscle mass, and women 55 are really at the peak of fat storage. Fat storage is far easier. So what makes us think if we follow those exercise recommendations, they'll work? And that's when I started to get a little upset, and the conviction in my voice got stronger. And it's like, I've been teaching this, like I believed a certain set of rules. And, in a sense, I'm not Catholic, but I feel like I am kind of confessing, and this is time to make it right. And we need to be louder. In 2013, nobody was talking about menopause exercise. More people are talking about it now, which is a good thing. So that kind of brings me to where I'm at. But I was a slow learner. So although I had all the evidence that doing less worked better, I also have a passion for endurance exercise. And I know that we share this, Margaret, but don't mean to throw you under the bus. Until it's not working, you can just keep right on doing that. But at about 56, I tried one more endurance event. And that was the one that threw me under the bus. My hormone kind of mechanics and all things happened. A lot of mold exposure, a lot of stress, hit menopause, was training for an Ironman. All things just really wreaked havoc with me. So, it's said that whatever it is you're going to teach, chances are you're going to get a lesson about how to teach it better. I did. So, I learned a lot, and I think you are a better example. You have more empathy. And you have the ability to see we're not a blueprint, or we're not a one size fits all. I think we are a blueprint, and that is with if this, then that. But every woman is going to have a different ride through menopause. And so that's what we try to convey. There are some basic rules that do apply to women, but they're more questions. How do you answer that question? And how do you answer it today versus next week or next month?
I think that's so powerful. The fact that the data is so skewed to just this like one group. And we do try to get we do try to do the things that worked and that used to work. And I know for myself, I turned 50 this year, and things are changing. They haven't changed significantly yet, but I can feel myself when things aren't responding. Muscle recovery takes a little bit longer, and certain things, I feel myself doubling down. And I also hear you in my ears. So I feel very blessed that we've had conversations and gone for runs together, and I've got my eyes more open. I do have questions about endurance, but we will get there. What I would love to ask, so knowing that so much of the information that's out there is not particularly helpful or designed specifically for women in midlife. What would you say are the biggest myths about exercise for midlife in women, for midlife women, and in terms of what people come to you believing that you're having to help them reverse and flip?
Yeah. And I mean, it always is going to come back to, we think it's always about burning calories. And well, let me start before that. So generally in menopause, the biggest challenge and obstacle many women will experience is weight gain or a loss of lean muscle mass. So they feel, I don't have the tone I don't. And there's also an energy issue, but I don't have the tone, or I'm gaining weight, or I'm gaining belly fat. So it may not be an overall weight gain, but it's a relocation that's taken up residence somewhere it wasn't. And I think the myth is, in order to get that off, I need to burn calories. And we've equated cardiovascular activity to burning calories. And for good reason, right? If we take 30 minutes of, running on a treadmill, or walking for that matter, compare that to the energy expenditure directly calorically to strength training. If we're looking at during exercise, cardio will win. So that's one of the biggest myths. And, here's what happens. There's a lot of rules that we're breaking by doing that. It's not about the calories in or out alone. And I think I'm afraid you're going to shoot arrows at me in this audience right here, but we can't ignore that completely. However, I think it's much more about what the calories we choose to put in or that we're burning, what effect does that have on your hormones, which ultimately decide, are you burning or are you storing fat? We got away with potentially not doing that in our 20s or our 30s. It's not that it was working well then, but I think we got away with it because we had peak muscle mass. We were, doing a little bit better easily with metabolism because of that. We had energy. We weren't dealing with insomnia, most of us. And now we have to stay a little more straight and narrow. We have to keep it between the navigational buoys.
The Clinicians Corner podcast is sponsored by Restorative Wellness Solutions, the premier clinical training program for health practitioners who want to learn how to finally get to the root source of their clients' health concerns and help them reverse complex health challenges and chronic illness. You can't afford to keep guessing. Your clients can't afford it either. Today's clients are sicker than ever before. Their health histories are more complex than ever before. And you simply can't deliver the results they crave or build the practice you desire without the right clinical skills. Enter Restorative Wellness Solutions' foundational course, Mastering the Art and Science of Gastrointestinal Healing. Our clinically proven, systematic approach to restoring balance within the body that has helped over 1,000 practitioners transform their clients' lives, grow their business, and change the way health is delivered. In less than 12 weeks, you'll develop the clinical skills and confidence you need to help your clients feel better, faster. Learn how to work with advanced lab testing to identify food sensitivities and imbalances within the gut. Craft custom targeted protocols that truly resolve your client's gut issues, and work safely and effectively with supplements to deliver consistently life-changing results. Enrollment for our fall 2024 semester is now open. Visit masterguthealing.com to apply today. Wonderful. And you mentioned, I think you dropped a clue in there, that calories burned during exercise is one thing, but when you're talking about strength training, it's not just about the calories burned during exercise. Can you talk about some of the metabolic shifts that happen when you add in strength training beyond the time actually in the gym lifting the weight?
Yeah, well, and I taught a class for 15 years and multiple sections, generally every semester. So I got so good at saying this, for every 1 liter of oxygen consumed, we burn 5 kcals. Well, you're burning, at a faster rate. You're taking deeper breaths when you're running versus when you're doing a strength training workout. You can get a little breathless at the end of a set of squats, certainly, but you're not maintaining it. So you're going to consume more oxygen, definitely, when you're doing cardio versus you're doing strength training. However, the additional burn, the caloric burn in restoring exercise. So we call it excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. EPOC is far greater for strength training than it is for cardio. Now, if you look at doing a marathon, okay, you're going to peak at that, but you've also probably got some cortisol stuff going on that is, negating benefits when you look at it that way. But your rate of metabolic burn and your muscle protein synthesis is going to be up after strength training for anywhere between 48 or 24 to 48, even 72 hours, depending on the intensity of it. That's all far more valuable. And I think it's also, we've got to look at, let's say you take an industrial attempt at doing strength training for 3 months, you're focusing on gaining lean muscle mass. Say you gain 3 pounds of more lean muscle mass. Every activity you do all day, sitting here with us, maybe you're walking while you're listening, those activities are burning more calories because you now have more lean muscle mass. Every movement you make, even sleeping, will burn more calories around the clock. That's what really gives you the energy for life. You're choosing to, let's go for a walk after dinner. Let's take the dog around one more block. And all of that activity really adds up.
I love it. I want to go through 3 scenarios and talk through some of these nuances and thinking about the types. I'm just going to put in, this is sort of generic types of clients that we would see in our practice, and talk about some of the differences that we would be considering in terms of exercise for each of these 3 women. So let's say client A would be super athletic her whole life, like somebody who's done lots of strength training, some good cardio, really balanced, and exercise has been and is and has always been a big part of her life. So what does this type of client, one who seems to have it all together, who's doing all the right things as she is starting to approach menopause, what are some of the things that this type of client needs to be thinking about as she makes that transition into menopause? Is it just business as usual because exercise has been such a big part of her life, or should she proactively start to tweak some things ahead of time? And if so, what things and when?
Yeah, such a great question. So first of all, I would love if we get those kinds of people being proactive. Could we please, right? Unfortunately, usually they're coming to you after they've tried 15 things. But generally, I would say, let's have everybody do a benchmark. And, if we could go really out on the deep end and say, what I'd love for everyone to do is a DEXA scan. Let's do a benchmark before you're struggling, before anything has changed negatively, at least outwardly. So you know what's going on under the hood. And this is really important. A lot of women will do a DEXA scan, but not until they're 60, maybe before their doctor will recommend it or insurance might cover it. And they're thinking, I don't want to pay it out of pocket. Oh my gosh. We pay more for dinner in a crazy hotel room sometimes than for the things that will be life-saving. So we need to reframe with that. But I would love that to happen. And yet, if we back down, one of the very first things that I think every household right now should have a smart scale. Get a smart scale within the budget that tells you what is your muscle mass, your skeletal muscle mass, in absolute terms, pounds or kilograms, not a sliding scale. So percent body fat, that's fine. But what we want is not a percent of skeletal muscle. I want to know absolutely, and if you're a woman over 40, I would suggest we want to know what is it now. And I never, ever, ever want to see that number go backward. And if it does, we need to recoup right now, because you can do that in your 40s. Easier than you can in your 50s. In your 60s, it's going to be a little harder yet. In your 70s and 80s, it will get harder. So we really consciously want to know that on a regular basis. And we don't want to have to go to, a gym or a nutrition store or your doctor and make a huge effort. If you can do that weekly. And I will say that, sometimes the next question asking about that is, how accurate are they? And my answer to that is, I don't care. right? If you didn't know what that number was yesterday, now you have a number. And if it's not calibrated perfectly, it's still going to show you change. Is it going up or down or staying the same? And that's the most important. I pinched a lot of fat, over 15 years. And as a grad student and undergrad, you had to do skin fold calipers, and we had Omron, but it was new and we didn't necessarily trust it, and that's not always accurate unless you've had 5,000 reps. It's not even getting close to accurate. But do we have some kind of a measure that's same measure, pre and post, same status? Yes, and that's the most important thing, that now it's on my radar. What's measured matters. It matters more because we're paying attention. So I would look at those things. Is what she's doing really working? And maybe bump the ratio of her workout, prioritizing, as you've said, recovery is the first thing. I think that you start to notice you're not recovering, but someone with her status might be more likely to push through than to say, I got to listen to that. And maybe I need another day off or a lighter workout today to be 100% recovered to do the hard one I had planned. And that's probably the biggest, change that I would make for somebody like that who has no complaints yet, but is pre-meditating.
That is a really, really hard mental challenge for some people.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of athletes, male and female, and I myself find this, it is hard not to live by the training schedule and to listen to the body's needs. So I think that in a client like this, really supporting them to tune in and to understand that, recovery first. There's that mantra of like, it's not overtraining, it's under recovery. And you can say it till you're blue in the face, but it's living it is a totally different thing. Well, good question here from Carrie. Do you have a favorite SMART scale that you recommend?
I do. It's the Rolls Royce of them. It's an in-body. Yep. And so I'm talking $350. Multiple people in your household can get on it. Yeah. But again, if this is life-saving, this keeps you from getting sarcopenia when you're 70 or you're 80, or getting sarcopenia and so weak that you're frail and balance is poor, and that results in a fall or a fracture. Is that worth it, as an investment? But I think you can go all the way down to 25 and 35. I do think there's probably a sweet spot. You get what you pay for.
Yeah, 100%, as with any of these things. Well, let's go to client B. So client B would be that client who used to be athletic when she was younger, maybe like college athlete, but then as she got older, fell off the exercising wagon because life, right? Kids, work, 1,000,001 things pulling her in 1,000,001 directions. What are some specific considerations that she should factor in? So somebody who has this background of athletic endeavors and knows how to train, but has not been for, let's say, anywhere from, 5 to maybe as much as 20 years.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest risk here is you're going to try to go back to the workouts that you feel you were just doing yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we look up and 20 years has gone by and we want to get back to where we were. I'm sure many of you hear those words frequently. And, I think we've got to help them look out the front mirror, the front window, as opposed to the rear view. We're not going back there and we're not going to get back there. So I think it's realizing can't go back to what you did in college, what you did in high school. You don't have the hormones you did when you were then. So we need to look at where you are now. I think it is starting from, number one, huge assets. Muscle memory is a great thing. I think you can rely on that from 20 or 30 years ago. You think of yourself still as an athlete, that's a huge asset. And I think playing up on that. So it's not only training the bone and the muscle, but it's training the brain in terms of mindset, and you get someone to think about that, think she's going to bounce back easy. She will, if she believes that, and getting started is just smart. We still have to lay a foundation of the ligaments and the tendons, the connective tissue. So she can't jump right back in. She needs to, start slow, lay that foundation, remembering that the first 6 to 8 weeks are about the neural connection and kind of plugging in those outlets all over again.
Yeah.
But it will come fast and quickly for her, more so than someone who doesn't have any history of it. But again, then the same rules apply. I would have her measure right now. She's going to, excitingly, see a lot of progress, in her first couple of months. So if you can get her to measure, and sometimes you may have experienced, it's hard to get people to measure away, do that body composition, because they don't want to until they have better results, and they will always, always wish I would have done that before so I could see where was I. And, for some clients, I have to recommend have somebody else look at the scale and write it down for you, tuck it away. You don't have to see it, but we will want to know it. And it's one way to keep them on track and say, okay, I would have expected, a different rate of result. Let's look at what you're doing. Let's tweak it a little bit and change one variable so you can really help them.
Then let's take client 3.
Okay.
Who are client C, who, let's say someone who has never been one to exercise, not part of the lifestyle. Is there a too late in all of this where it's just like, sorry, we missed the boat? Or is it always something, doesn't matter how old you are, that you can start adding in and get benefit from?
Always something. We say, if somebody says that in our community, don't make me come over there and wash your mouth out with soap, right? Absolutely not. Since this is my 40th year in fitness, and I can remember being an undergraduate, and there were studies in existence then with 90-year-olds who'd never lifted weights before, showing they can gain strength. There's proof that it gets a little harder to gain lean muscle mass. And that word can scare a lot of people, but the mass, or gaining more muscle tissue, more fibers, or having them be stronger and expand, means we have more metabolism, more metabolically active tissue. It's a little harder to gain mass. Hypertrophy is harder, but strength is still very possible as we're older. So even into our 90s, that's all we have now. We're seeing more people live into triple digits. So that science, I'm sure, is coming. We've all seen the anomaly of somebody who just did her, sprint or her marathon or her 5K in her 90s or at 100. That could be you and I at some point.
Oh, that was a future question, but yes, I know the Guinness Book of World Records, the oldest female marathoner, 92.
Wow.
Gonna beat it. Before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about how exercise, and if there's like specific aspects, different types of exercise that can either positively or negatively impact the various signs and symptoms of menopause. Like, how do we navigate that? We have our female clients coming to us, they might be having hot flashes, sleep issues. Is this just a straight up, if you're overdoing it, you're going to exacerbate those symptoms, so we need to back off? Or are there more nuances than that?
That's such a great question. So to answer that question, and you kind of did, really, you hinted at this, but restore before more is, we have commandments at Flipping 50. That's our first tenet. So yes, quite often that's what we're doing, is we're doing too much. If we're exhausted and we're not losing weight, and in fact, getting the opposite of the desired effect, you're putting on weight, you're putting it on in the belly, it feels like inflammation. I've had this happen to myself in the year that, all the wheels fell off the bus and it was a perfect storm. My muscle mass didn't change, my fat percent didn't change, but my weight went up. Inflammation, right? And a significant amount of it. So you're feeling fluffy. There's a lot more padding in the cushions, not necessarily fat, but it's certainly nothing good, right? And those kinds of things are definitely issues. So restore before more is one thing we say. We use a pyramid, by the way. So high intensity interval training is at the top. Yes, we want it, but it's like icing on the cake. We use a little bit of it every week, not a lot of it. It's very effective when you do it a little bit every week, but not when you do a lot of it. And then there's the base of that triangle. The base of it is movement every day. And that might be for you walking, but it also just might be maybe you have an active job. You can stand up, you can walking, treadmill, desk bike sitting in front of me. I don't know why I'm not sitting at that. You're getting up frequently to take a puppy outside or a dog outside, just breaking up sedentary time. That counts. And most of us, I would say, need something equivalent to walking so that we are breaking up all of the just contemporary lifestyles that we've got. So much sitting at work, lots of sitting, even in our leisure, in the evening. And we automate everything, and for good reason, we're busy, but we've got to figure out, how do I make myself move? So that's the base. And when somebody is there and resting well, sleeping well, waking rested, have a good appetite, but not cravings, stable blood sugar, then I think they're ready for more. And the next thing is strength training, 2 to 3 times a week. I love twice weekly heavy, and I love sticking one that's more functional in between. So your functional workout could be body weight and a yoga workout that incorporates things like down dog, up dog. So you're almost doing push-ups regularly throughout that. Your one-legged things, rotation and lateral flexion are built right into yoga. Yoga is so intelligent. But you can also do that in a different way if there's something else you love. And then there's, at the very top, again, there's high intensity interval training. What's in the middle is what we call zone 3. Generally, I refer to that as no benefits zone. So what happens for women who are in midlife is we're more susceptible to the negative effects of cortisol. And what we know is that it's somewhere around 45 to 60 minutes. Cortisol, many of you will exercise. How many of you love exercise? And it's how you negate stress. Margaret and I are like, yes, don't say I can't go, right? And women are terrible judges. And I can say this because I am one, right? We're terrible judges of when our stress level is really significant. We sometimes don't know it because we've learned to push through. Like, you can count on me, I will get it done. And I'm not all that stressed, right? And yet we give you a lab test, look at your saliva, and your cortisol levels are not good, either too high or too low. And women notoriously just don't know. But we find that after 45 to 60 minutes, somewhere in there for most of us, cortisol continues to rise. It doesn't come down and get that corresponding drop after exercise. So what we've done is really put ourselves into a fat storage mode. We're probably skewing our blood sugar levels. Everything is going to be off, not an ideal situation. So long endurance exercise can really begin to backfire. And it depends on the individual. Margaret, you go into, menopause and you're already trained as an endurance athlete. You're going to do far better than someone else who's not been doing it and then suddenly says, well, I got to take this off. I've got to remove this. And they haven't been doing anything. So it's all relative to what's your training status. But it's also a bit, Russian roulette. What else is going on in your life? What are the other major stressors? So it can be really problematic to do a lot of endurance training. So that's the one we drop out right away. And everything comes from the top down. If we need to drop out and restore before more, let's get rid of HIIT. See how you do.
Yeah.
If that's not enough, maybe we get rid of strength training for a while and let's do yoga and walking and bring you back to a rested state. And then we begin to build back up again.
Well, you really just answered my next question, which is a little bit of a self-indulgent question. I will not stay here for too long, but I do just want to. So I was going to ask, are there exercises that women, particularly sort of 50 and up, should actively avoid? And if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that zone 3, which I will just, like, total confession, I mean, I spend my life in zone 3, is that is not necessarily ideal. And then if you're noticing issues in other pieces, that would be the first thing to go. Not meaning that you can't do it, but that everything else really has to be in play. You have to be, one of the questions I saw is like, how do you know if you are recovered? It sort of gets a little bit murky down the road. And so that would be another question, is how do we know that we are recovering properly as we get older? And a lot of different things start to come, and it's like, is this the exercise? Is it just hormones? Is it this? Or is it, we are one whole complete human? Maybe we can't isolate in that way. So how do we know if it's okay for us to be adding in that?
Yeah, great question. And you are the anomaly. Literally, anybody who's doing like half marathons, that's where they would train, right? And yet, for the rest of us, that is not where we want to be. And you don't fix it if it's not broken. So I'm a big fan of, if it's still working, fantastic. And, there may be a way to cut down on volume, so that you're training a little differently, in your 50s than you did in your 40s. And that's working because you're giving yourself the recovery you need. And you may find, okay, my times are getting better. I'm still competing because I'm giving myself what I need. But yeah, we are a collective. So those hormones, can you say, is it the exercise or is it just hormones? The exercise is influencing the hormones, and the hormones are influencing the exercise. So it is so integrated that I think one thing we do need to do is, you want to look at all things, I think, encompassed and say, have I changed any one thing? Or go back to 7th grade science. And if we're really going to do a test, change one thing and say, let's watch if we add one more recovery day in this week. Don't necessarily change the workouts, we keep in, but we add another recovery day between. Does that make a difference in, how I'm feeling? So it always comes back to that. How am I feeling? How am I sleeping? How am I focusing? How's my libido? How's my just optimism, and mood? And all those things are just immediate symptoms that even if you don't have a lab test to go on, and for a woman in perimenopause, signs and symptoms sometimes are much more beneficial, because a hormone test this week could be very different than 2 weeks from now or a month from now, when she's still fluctuating so very much.
Yeah. 100%. Well, I think that's where, this crew of practitioners have a lot of advantages, right? In learning, understanding how to work with different tests so we can get that insight. A comment that Ellen made earlier in the comments is one of the genetic tests that we work with is the 3x4 genetics. And I don't know if you're familiar with that test, but they have a whole section on genetic predispositions with activity. And it will give you, for example, genetic predisposition. Do you need more recovery, or are you one of those people who can knock out hard workout after hard workout? So taking all of these factors into consideration can really help customize that sort of that truly bioidentical program that is what this individual needs in this moment in time, which changes. I remember I was working with this incredible coach in Portland, and his wife is a very successful professional runner. And I've been trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And he put me on this training plan. And he's like, oh, this is her plan from, when she won New York in 2017. I just took out a few workouts. And I will tell you, I did that plan. And I will tell you, it almost killed me. And my girlfriends were like, do you realize that, first of all, she was in her 20s. Second of all, she was a professional athlete. All she did was this and recover. Third, she didn't have kids. Fourth, she didn't have three other businesses that she was running on the side. And I did try to do it all. And I will say it took me a solid 6 months to come back around after that. Now, I ran really, really fast in the race, and I didn't fully qualify, but I had a great race. But then it was just like, so I really think that all of these pieces, we really need to take all of this into consideration, even if it feels, it was really exciting and tempting to do her workouts. It felt really cool. And I, at the time, late 40s, 2 small children, etc. So very different contexts.
And I think that is so relative for anybody here working with anyone, is The exercise, there's a blueprint, there's a formula. We'd like to see them doing strength 2 to 3 times a week. We'd like to see them potentially doing HIIT 1 to 3 or 4 times if they're post-menopause and they're more stable. And then you still have to factor in, are they caregiving for an aging parent? Is there additional stressors there? Are they changing jobs, starting a business? What else is going on at home? Because you can control the exercise stress, but sometimes life stressors you can't. And so it's up to us to juggle, and help them see, let's just dial this back a little bit. And you actually may get the fitness level you want by dialing back, because life stress is high and you're going to be in better shape and get what you want. And I think that's a hard lesson. Just like you said, convincing somebody cutting back will get them in better shape is a challenge.
Yeah. I'll be honest, there's days I still don't believe it. I know it in my head, and in my heart, I'm like, but I just need more miles. I want to switch gears here. There's some great questions here about hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah.
And I want to unpack that, because taking hormone replacement therapy, let's just assume bioidenticals in this crowd. So someone's on bioidenticals. How is that going to influence things? And conversely, if someone, for other health reasons, maybe history of cancer or otherwise, is not able to do bioidenticals, is that a big sort of Achilles heel? Can you kind of walk us through the nuances there?
Yeah. I think right now, in our community, just for example, there are women who are, and there are women who are not. And some of it is personal choice. Some of it, I think, is still an unintentional lack of information. They're still believing, the Women's Health Initiative has been withdrawn and discounted, and yet it was in everybody's head for so very long that still lingers. There's a lot of fear around, hormone replacement, and kind of it's a blanket statement for a lot of people. So what we think and know, and we're coming up on a what, when, and why to exercise for women 40 and over 2.0 summit. Dr. Felice Gersh, great person to follow if you're interested in someone on hormones. I see heads nodding here. She's in California. And, one of her quotes was, your exercise efficacy will be greater if you're on hormone replacement therapy. Now, that's not to say your exercise prescription should change. I believe it's the same for all. We still are going to pay attention to how we feel. We're going to use skeletal muscle mass and body composition. We're going to use, where's that weight depositing? How is our sleep? And all of the both objective and subjective measures. But I do see it's easier for women who are on HRT to gain lean muscle mass. Sometimes that's because they feel better, more energetic, and they're sleeping better so they can do the workout. And sometimes it's because that wasn't an issue necessarily, but they are just able to get a full contraction. If you're low on estrogen or it's insufficient, you don't have a full muscle contraction, and a lot of us didn't know that, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
But bone density, muscle, both the results tend to be better and come a little faster for those who are on HRT.
Look at that. So if somebody is not able to, or not interested in doing it for whatever the reason, are there other things that they can do to inspire a similar response? So for example, things like essential amino acids, creatine, are there supplements? Are there kind of ways of kind of hacking around the inability to do the hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah, and I would say anybody who's doing hormones would also want to do those other things. But eating for hormone balance, Magdalena Wisłocki, is great at coming up with recipes, talking a lot about how food can actually help your hormonal balance. But yes, to, protein supplementation, and, it's not as easy to carry around a turkey sandwich in your pocket as it is, serving of protein powder so you can have it wherever. And that's, a lot of people are a little turned off with that because it's processed, at least even minimally with good quality ones. But I would always say, I'd rather see you get in the protein than not get in the protein. And so food first, absolutely. But that's one way. Creatine, I think it's almost now inarguably, something for adults over 40 or definitely over 50 for muscle, for bone, and for brain health.
Mhm.
All of the emerging research is pointing to it's so very beneficial. So definitely that ramping up slowly. Vitamin D, agreed that generally we see fast twitch muscle fiber, especially, which is our reaction skills. And that's what's going to make us go down. If you're only walking, that's not helpful. We need to be strength training, doing agility, fast reaction type of movements, and taking that vitamin D or making sure that we're sufficient in it, whatever way that comes in, whether that's sunshine or it's through supplementation. I also find and wonder what this is about, but taking omega-3s and making sure, and eating fish too, healthy fatty fishes, but taking omega-3s to decrease inflammation, I think has a huge effect on improvements in muscle mass. And I don't know that there's any research to show direct correlation with an increase of bone density, but we do know that indirectly, if we gain more muscle, we've got muscle pulling on the bone, we're able to lift heavier, that has an impact on the bone. So I think that indirectly we're still getting it. For our community, it helps to decrease aches and pains. Joints feel better when somebody is doing a higher dose of omega-3s. And today, we haven't seen any negative side effects of even higher doses than norm, but I'm not talking clinical high.
Interesting. Very interesting. Let's talk now about somebody who is struggling with some serious health issues. You mentioned your experience with mold, somebody maybe with autoimmune, a lot of different health issues going on. They're exhausted. They're on a heavy duty protocol already. Would we apply the same logic of recover before more? Am I saying it right? It's
Restore
before more.
more.
I was like, wait, it sounded better when you said it. Restore before more. Are we following that same logic and encouraging much more gentle forms of exercise? I would assume, how do we bring them along this journey? Because there can be that, I know, for example, someone with rheumatoid arthritis who is in pain, one of the best things, but the hardest things to convince them to do is actually movement.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not comfortable at first, and then it yields this benefit later. So what are some of your thoughts on finding that balance?
Yeah, great question. So definitely restore before more. So if they're not recovered, this is where all of you come in and do that foundational work and get them, the nutrients and the density there that they need. But then generally, especially with someone who's got an autoimmune disease, one of the biggest things that will help them is actually more muscle tissue. Muscles an endocrine organ, helps them manage blood sugar levels, which helps them manage inflammation. And I think that's not said enough, that muscle is an endocrine organ. And we could look at that as this is your hormone replacement. If you can't do anything else, you can do this. So with, say, something like Hashimoto's, strength training is one of the most important things. And because it's important doesn't mean we do it more frequently. That's a risk. A lot of people confuse that or ask, if strength training is the best, why don't we do it more? And so it's that dance between, yep, let's get enough stimulus. And to come back to a question I did not answer directly earlier, you asked about hot flashes, night sweats, how do we help those? Actually, the research will say, and researchers interpret this themselves as, yes, it will help to reduce either frequency or intensity, or wouldn't we want both if we could, of hot flashes and night sweats, if the exercise is intense enough. So this is where, that's interesting. We don't just start them low and light, but we may want to get them breathless. we want them to get to muscle fatigue with whatever weights make sense. Maybe that's lighter ones, more repetitions because they're starting, or because there's fibromyalgia or rheumatoid arthritis. Carefully getting or approaching the point of muscular fatigue without joint stress. Those things actually can help, and doing small bits of those. And this is where we have to throw out position statements and guidelines. At one point it was, you have to get a quota of exercise or it doesn't count. If you don't get 20 minutes of cardio, it doesn't count. We now know you can get 30 seconds, right, of high intensity interval training, and it counts. It counts. And we know you can do a full body, total body workout in 10 minutes if you're organized and you know what you're doing. It's 3 exercises 3 times. It's going to be much more valuable than doing, 10 exercises 1 time each. So it's knowing, how do I apply that stress so that I am stressing the muscles, maybe also bone, but not the endocrine system.
Right.
That's the dance. Yeah.
It is a dance. It's so fascinating. I also, Carrie had a question here. I think it's an important point of clarification. We just kind of moved past it, but I want to make sure everyone understands when we're talking about that sort of danger zone, the zone 3, we're not talking about walking, hiking. You're talking about that sort of steady state cardio, like a run, like somebody on the Stairmaster, like being on the, bike for a long period of time. And you're also talking about that sustained, 45 to 50 minutes and up. So, 30 minutes, probably not as problematic as, higher.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's potentially it's relative. So if you had a really deconditioned individual, even 30 minutes might, that would not necessarily, we wouldn't say, go run 30 minutes, come back and tell me how you did, right? Because that'd be a lot for someone. But yeah, in general, it's what we all learned in the 80s. Those of us who are over 50 or 60, definitely that aerobic, get in the target heart rate zone, take your target heart rate. Don't be too high, don't be too low. It's what we did back in the day. That's not where you want to be. So it is below the point where you're getting breathless and have to stop, but it's above the point where you're at all day pace. And yet there's also that cardiac drift, not to be confused with cardiac arrest, right? It just means you're out there doing it at a lower pace, but the intensity will pick up with the more endurance you do, and your cardiovascular system, your heart rate will go up, and you may get more out of breath simply because hydration becomes an issue. And so you are efforting more. So if you were truly training by heart rate, you would really need to slow down your speed in order to stay in that same zone 2 as opposed to zone 3.
100%.
Yeah.
So I mentioned I'm turning 50 this year, and to celebrate, it's probably a terrible idea, but I've set out to run 50 miles on my 50th birthday. But one of the things that I've been working with is the heart rate. And it's really interesting. I'm doing these very long runs. I was out there yesterday for 3 hours, but I've got a very tight heart rate window to stay within. And it's interesting because at the beginning, I'm going so slowly, but it's hard to keep it's like, okay, I got to get that right up. But then at a certain point, it's like it feels like I'm hardly going at all. And the heart rate keeps bumping up and I have to keep stopping and walking. But that's really the key is to be able to sustain that. The key is to be able to, to know that you will have to gradually reduce intensity over time. And you're right, hydration, electrolyte balance, fuel, all of this starts to play a really significant role. It's just really interesting how the body starts to compensate. This actually brings me to Patty's question, which I think is a really important one. All these trackers, right? So from whether it's a CGM measuring blood sugar, whether it's, the Garmin or the Aura or the Whoop or the heart rate monitor specifically, like what do you think about using some of these tech tools to help dial in identifying recovery, dialing in certain key pieces? I see that Patty says she did a 5K, her glucose spiked into the 200s, which will happen when you're exerting. I've seen some hard workouts. I've looked at my blood sugar at readings later and been like, wowzers, that was quite a glucose excursion. I mean, luckily it comes right back down again. But what are your thoughts on using the tech to help dial this in?
Yeah, and I love it and I hate it. So, or not hate it, but I think I don't put all my eggs in that basket. So the one thing that I would continue to tell people is don't forget the most important thing. How do you feel? I mean, we're letting trackers run our lives and forgetting, okay, wait, how do you feel? Or an example is, they'll lose fat and they'll gain muscle, but they'll get on the scale and be defeated because they didn't change weight. Are you kidding me? Right? I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, let's keep in mind here where we're going. But when I wrote You Still Got It, Girl, heart rate variability monitors actually weren't in trackers yet. So it was a heart rate strap and I had to do an app and get up in the morning. It was all very cumbersome. So I love that it's available. And I have people that I, as clients, I'm sure you all do, and maybe it's yourself that I have to argue with, let's try another day off. Let's take a recovery day, but when they can see it, the heart rate variability score is not great. Now they at least understand it. It's conclusive, some evidence in addition to how they feel. Or the results they're getting. They're wanting to lose weight and they're not. Potentially they're exercising so much that they're actually maybe wasting muscle as opposed to gaining it to improve lean body composition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've definitely been one of those to overtrack and get a little obsessed with the data and not connect in with what's going on inside. There's so many great questions. I'm going to ask one here. It's one of the last questions we have here. And then I want to ask you to share how people can dig in more with you. So I'm sorry to those. There's so many great questions in here. We could talk with you for hours. Emily asks about fueling suggestions for recovery, both recovering from strength training, recovering from endurance. And I'm going to just add a nuance to that. Does that change as we get older?
I think yes, it does. And I also think, though, for someone like you, Margaret, who say is training very regularly and really has a regime and a goal, and so you're coming at it, with here's my next workout, I know what I'm doing, versus somebody who's a little bit more casual. I have this fitness goal. I want to be optimal in terms of my aging. I want to be healthy, but not necessarily performance level. There's probably a difference. I would say for you, I want you to eat quickly, fairly soon after your workout to recover, because you're going to go after it again. Right. And your life is a little bit busier. That also says, okay, right. You're not the professional athlete. Nobody yet is paying you. I said yet, right? Because maybe that's happening for you.
I love that you put that out there.
Yeah, right. So universe, are you listening? So I think yes. And there's also a little bit of a blunting effect on muscle protein synthesis. And, some of the research that came out of University of Texas Medical Branch, back in 2013 and still out there says muscle protein synthesis is optimal, sometime between 60 and 90 minutes after a workout. But I think that changes. And I did notice somebody asked earlier, what about fasted workouts? Okay. I would say, and this is not a popular answer, I would say I'd rather see women do a fed workout, even if it's just cream in your coffee. And so you've got some calories in, and if you're very minimal space between getting up and your exercise, cream in your coffee, at least you've got some caloric start to the fire burning. And then for you, I want you to eat almost immediately, because an overnight fast, exercising in an almost fasted state, we got muscle breakdown. Let's not increase it by more no protein coming in, right? So get it in quickly. If you say your exercise happens, mid-morning and you've had breakfast, you have more wiggle room. You can wait a little bit longer, and maybe it's just you shower and you have lunch. You're probably right in there in that window of you're getting it in 90 minutes. something recently came out, and this was probably within the last 6 months. And I'm sure you saw it too, Margaret, that, we used to think, oh my gosh, you got to get that protein in right now, get it in right now. And those who were bodybuilders or maybe runners were pretty obsessed about it. Like, I gotta replenish, refuel right away. And now we know that if you're eating really well and you're having good high quality protein around the clock, it's less important. It is important that you get it in, but are you really doing damage if 2 hours goes by after a workout and you miss that? I would only say to the woman who knows your mood and your energy goes like this during the day, it's probably more important for you to bumper or bookend your workout with getting protein in and getting protein in. And here's the advantage of that. There's two things as we age that increase our muscle protein synthesis, the ability to keep it. Exercise, particularly resistance training, and eating high protein. If we can marry them, we get an even bigger bump. I mean, I'll take a bonus anytime, right?
100%.
Yeah.
I will share just anecdotally, when I dramatically increased my protein intake, significant improvement in performance and recovery. And I will say I've also noticed that it doesn't really matter either, if at least for me, this is my experience, it hasn't made a difference as long as I get in the protein over the course of the day.
Yeah.
As long as that happens, then the rest of it works out. Because I know sometimes if you've done a really hard workout, particularly HIIT, or, if I've, that after that 3-hour long run, you'd think I'd be starving. I'm actually just like, this food is kind of the last thing I can think of. I do make myself drink a protein drink just to get something in. But as long as I'm hitting it throughout the day, even if it's not immediately after, I've noticed that the benefits seem to be there. As you said, the timing isn't as persnickety as I used to try to just make it happen right after and be almost sick trying to force my body to take in nutrients when it was just need to recover, need a minute here. So that definitely, that bears true with my experience. Gosh, there's so many great things. I would love to, for you to share all the different ways for folks to stay in touch. I mean, you've got your podcast, you've got your YouTube channel. I know you do great stuff on Instagram. You guys, this is a little aside, but for any of you who are looking to build your business and you're looking for a role model of somebody who uses social media beautifully, follow Debra. Even if you're going to get great fitness and advice along the way, but just watch what she does. She's great at it. So, and then you have a practitioner training program. So talk to us about the different ways for people to stay in touch and engage.
Yeah, absolutely. So in social media, we're at Flipping 50 TV, Flipping 50 TV, like television. I'm sure I just dated myself, but yes. Flipping50.com. That's all spelled out. But if you go to Flipping 50, we've got that one too. So you'll end up in the right place. That's our website. So the podcast, the show notes are there. Blogs are there. And if you'd prefer, we're on Stitcher or iHeartRadio or iTunes. Anywhere you download your podcast, we're there. So great guests on that one. Margaret, we probably need to rotate you in. I don't know why you haven't been there so far. And some solos, but usually tapping into, the hormones, the menopause, the, problem solving on those podcasts. And yes, practitioners. So we've done the Flipping 50 Menopause Fitness Specialist since 2018. And because in 2013, there wasn't anything, no one was doing it. All my peers and colleagues said, nobody's doing this. And so when we started training, I think there are a couple other good programs out there, but we're the only that I know of specifically focused on menopause, not just overall women's, but focusing on perimenopause, menopause transition, postmenopause. And ultimately it's longevity. How you exercise during menopause is how you will age, period. End of story. So you can find out more from that. We have a special page actually for RWS. So flipping50.com/specialist RWS. And it is closed right now, but there's a special password protected page. Be ready for it. It's RWS is your password, right? And RWS is your code as well. So you can't hardly forget that one. But if you're interested in checking that out, you'll find everything there. And we're giving you a $500 off offer because we love Margaret so very much.
Thank you. Julie, if you could pop that link into the chat. I saw you did the overall flipping 50, but if you could also do the link to that. There we go. The flipping 50 specialist. So that's the special, that's just a page that's just open for you guys. So grab that, and we will also put it, of course, in the show notes and all of that good stuff. Debra, this has been wonderful. And I have touched, like, I had so many questions for you. We just are going to have to do a part 2 at some time, because I can see there's also been some fantastic questions in the chat as well that we didn't have time to get to. So we'll need to do another one of these at some point, but thank you so much. Great information.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you all for the questions, because I'm sure, as always, if you asked it, somebody else had it.
Okay. Oh, wait, I saw someone say, people are saying the link didn't work. We will figure that out and make sure that the link does work. So we will get back to you on that. But thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Thank you, Julie, for your help. And thank you, Debra. Wonderful, as always.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Clinicians Corner. Don't forget to head to the show notes to access additional links and resources. And if you like today's episode, please be sure to hit the follow button and consider leaving a review, sharing it on social, or texting it to a colleague. The more we spread the word, the more lives we can impact for the better.